Hello, everyone, and welcome to 180 Degrees of Impact. My name is Matt Scott, and today I am with Max Friedman of Give Butter, as you can see right above his head, right there. Max, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How you doing?
Good, and I'm excited to kind of dive in and talk with you more about Give Butter. Uh, we've had conversations, and I'm familiar with Give Butter to an extent and with your story to an extent, but what's exciting to me about 100 Degrees of Impact is that I actually get to really learn more from you and more about what makes you tick. And as a result, everyone who's watching will get to hear from you and learn about what makes you tick. So excited to have you here, and to just dive in and get started out, I'd love if you could introduce yourself to the 108 Degrees of Impact audience.
Cool. So, as you already started out, I'm Max Friedman. I'm from a small town in Hollis, New Hampshire, named Hollis, New Hampshire, in New Hampshire. And I went to GW and graduated this last year with a computer science and finance degree. And my whole story is just kind of like everybody else, just came to GW and was not sure what I wanted to do, interested in politics, did a little bit of business stuff. And then I just got this startup bug. I just found that it was really cool. Every time I read about Mark Cuban or the next big thing going on in Silicon Valley, that there was a lot of excitement, and I love the idea that you could create something from nothing and actually have that impact people in a positive way. And so I just kind of went through college, tinkering and working on different side projects. I kind of wanted to be the ultimate. I didn't necessarily know how to code, so I was like, I'm going to be the best non-technical co-founder, or just founder of a startup idea. I ended up actually teaching myself how to code because I was not able to find anyone that could code to do it. So, and then it just kind of went from there. I just kind of worked on ideas here and there, and then ultimately, one of those ideas was Give Butter, and now 2 years later, after starting it while I was in school, working on it full time. That's what I do every day.
Awesome. And then how do you explain Give Butter to people? As I've read about and as you recognize, a lot of people are like, oh, that's a funny name. But
Right.
how would you sum up Give Butter?
So Give Butter is a social fundraising platform. Think GoFundMe, Kickstarter, all those places that you go to fundraise online. Give Butter is a lot like those, except where we specifically focus our efforts and energy and try to build our product for is student organizations and nonprofits. Think fraternities or sororities or chapters of nonprofits. We work with a lot of national nonprofits who have chapters on different college campuses and making a really positive fundraising experience for them. A lot of other fundraising sites take large fees. We have a bit of a different fee model in the way that we support the business. And we also just provide really awesome features for group or team fundraising. So if you have a bunch of people part of an organization, everyone kind of gets personalized fundraising pages to reach out to friends and family and to raise money. And we find that to be extremely effective in terms of helping people raise more money for good causes. So we do a lot of different things. We're trying to be your one-stop shop for fundraising if you're an organization. But that's kind of how I would sum up Give Butter.
Awesome. And I think it's an incredible resource for a lot of people who are especially getting started doing something awesome. And so I'm really interested in figuring out how I could use Give Butter personally, but I think it's a great resource for a ton of different groups, as you mentioned. Just knowing, like you mentioned earlier, your interest in business and catching that startup bug, what was it that you think initially drew you to business overall and to creating something awesome?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. If I were to go back to sort of like when I first got that itch, it was really just like, it might sound corny, but just this very natural progression of just following my heart. Like I just really found it cool that there were these people that were self-made, that just started from nothing and built something that didn't exist. Like that idea to me was so cool. Have something that doesn't exist, and you just create it, and then people use that, and it impacts people's lives. Like ego, like from an ego perspective, from a selfish perspective, like I just think that's awesome. And that gets me excited. And so that was really where it all stemmed from, was just this idea of like, wow, I can really create something. I can innovate. I can create something new. It felt like it was the perfect combination of my personal skills. Like I've always a lot of it kind of translated in gaming. Like I used to play tons of video games, and I would get like super addicted. I would just like really hone in and just stay up all night working at like playing a video game. And that like literally that same kind of thing translated to startups. I was like honed in, locked in. I would just like stay up all hours of the day working on something, and I was obsessive about it. I just really enjoyed that part of it, just learning and putting my skills to use, whether that's interpersonal skills or just working on everything from building a PowerPoint to reading up on an industry or whatever it was. I felt like I was just flexing all my different muscles, and like I really enjoyed that part of it. And that was kind of what really got me excited, I think, more than anything else, was just like following my heart. And it was a very it was very like internal thing. I think it just was very natural.
Mm-hmm. And I guess as a follow-up to that, it's really interesting. And just to affirm what you were saying, I ask people all the time why they do what they do, especially when it comes to something that's having a positive impact like Give Butter. And what I'm really reassured by is the fact that sometimes you have people who they had something happen. Like one of my friends, Eric Dowds, was diagnosed at the age of 16. We actually were in high school together, and he was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And, for him, that was a moment that really kicked off this calling where he did a ton of fundraising, raising tens of thousands of dollars. He's now traveling across America, across the country on train with one of my other friends, Cassidy Robinson, for this campaign and this brand called Die Badass. So he's doing all this cool stuff. Awesome. But at the same time, one of the last people I interviewed, a woman named Jade, who is a game composer, so overlapping with your interest in video gaming, she kind of just told me, like, look, this is something that just developed over time. It felt natural. So it's like not always about this like moment. As I was saying to her, it's not like, oh, I met this random person on the train and there was serendipity and all this like cool stuff happened after that. Sometimes it's just organic and natural. So that's cool to hear with you.
No, that's an awesome point. I talk to a lot of founders who it's like that's where the story starts. It's like something happens that is life changing, and that is the inspiration. I talk, especially in the nonprofit world, when I speak to a lot of small to mid-sized nonprofits, a lot of the founders of the nonprofits, something happened in their lives that inspired them to start this nonprofit to combat that. And so that's totally a theme, and I think that applies to a lot of things in life. Things happen, puts things in perspective, and then you reevaluate and check out what's important and what's not. And I think it's hard when almost it doesn't happen. Not that bad things should happen, but because that perspective is unique when you have it, when something impactful in your life is going on, or you get news about something, whatever it is. And so, I think it's an interesting thing to navigate as someone who might be interested in entrepreneurship or startups, but it's kind of like, what problems do I want to solve and what am I passionate about, and figuring that out can be a little bit, that can be a really hard process.
Yeah. And I kind of gave the example earlier of like meeting someone on a train, or like you were saying, those moments where something happens, often something negative happens that motivates someone to go a certain path. And thinking of like meeting people, I know you're one of the people I know who has, to the best of my knowledge, has had a ton of awesome mentors and supporters, and I'm curious from you, like, what has your experience been finding those mentors and actually learning from them? And please feel free to name names, because I think it's really cool to recognize people who are helping make us better at what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. So the kind of single person who kicked off my whole entrepreneurial path his name is Trevor Faden, and that all started because so he's a young GW alumni, and he had graduated just like the year before, and I was I think a freshman at the time, going into my sophomore year, and I had a startup idea. I was interested in startups, but I wasn't making a leap. I was non-technical, and I had a technical idea, and looking for that technical founder that doesn't exist in space. So I was like, well, in the meantime, I would be interested in working for a startup in the area or something. And I had just gotten a news update or something on Twitter, I think, that some GW alumni, Trevor Faden, just raised a couple $1 million for his startup. It was called Rebel Mail. Mm-hmm. And so I reached out, I sent him a message. or I just tweeted at him like, congrats or whatever. And then went to his site, and but I really tried to like contact him and get in touch with him, and eventually I did, and I asked if I could intern for him, because I just thought that would be really cool. And we ended up getting coffee, and I told him how I had some startup ideas of my own, and he was like, I think you should do that. He's like, I think you're awesome, but I think you should work on your startup idea. And he's like, I'll help you with it. Like he really did. I mean, he really was like a catalyst to pushing me to do that. I ended up basically just working like a retail job, like nothing exciting while I was home. And then at nights and weekends, I would just spend a ton of time coding and working on my idea. And he was a mentor throughout that process. And so I think a lot of times it's a cool thing when it's one of those things where it's like reach out for advice, get money, or reach out for, when you're just trying to build relationships and you just are genuine with people, especially when you're trying to get a mentor and really personalizing that. I think people really appreciate that when you get emailed, or someone reaches out to you and they want to work for you, work with you, or get your advice or get your opinions on things without asking for anything in return. And I think every good mentor relationship that I've had in my life, it hasn't been a ton, but they're always organic, and they're always, because the people I would call my mentors are really my friends at the end of the day. And so those types of relationships should not be transactional. They should be organic. And it's very like, I think that's at least for me personally, where I've gotten the most value out of is really having friends. And I really try to surround myself with people that are smarter than me, better than me, and doing, more impressive things than me. And they push me to be a better version of myself and to excel. So a lot of the mentors, I would call them, are really just people I try to, make who are my inner circle, if you will. Like, they're really my friends is what it comes down to.
Yeah. And I think it's easy to become complacent in life. Like that's the reality of a comfort zone. And so I think a lot of people don't necessarily challenge themselves by surrounding themselves with people who think differently, or who know more than them, or who could really help advance their knowledge and understanding of the world, essentially. So I think that's really cool that that's something that you are passionate about. And I mean, I've really seen that with your work, with your mentors, friends, whatever you want to call them. Like, I feel like everywhere I've looked, or a lot of places I've looked over the past few years, it's like looking at Social Driver and Anthony Shop in particular as someone who I know has really said great things about your work, and Alan Gannett, who's doing great work with Track Maven, talking about your work. And I think it's cool that that you appreciate that the benefit of just taking time to listen to people and share without expecting to get something in return. But thinking of your journey as you grow and develop, what have some of the challenges or opportunities been that either in terms of challenges that those friends have helped you overcome, or opportunities that they have exposed you to in your Give Butter journey, especially?
Yeah, one thing stands out, because I kind of left this out. I obviously talked a lot about the early stage of, because this was even when I talked to Trevor, like that was my very first idea. That was not Give Butter, that was 3 or 4 years ago. More recently, one thing I really wanted to work on was my writing. I really wanted to work on my personal brand and start doing more writing. I wanted to be a contributor at a well-known publication. And one of my best friends and mentors, Alan Gannett, already does that. And so he was enormously helpful in that process. Is, hey, Alan, I want to, work on this. And he's, send me something. And next thing I know, I'm in touch with an editor. And next thing I know, I'm actually in Fast Company. And so like things like that are instrumental. I mean, without having him in place, like I would not have met the editor. I would not have had the relationship. And then I would not have ended up, accomplishing my goal. And obviously there's always other ways to do it, but it's cool when you have such a strong relationship in place already, and then new things arise, opportunities, just like you were saying, and then they can help accelerate you to get you there. Starting off with an opportunity that you want to get to, but it's not already in front of you, and not having the people in place can make it much harder, because then you got to build the relationship and then make the ask. And it should never be the same thing. It should never be, the ask is the relationship, and that's how and obviously there are tons of examples where transactional things happen, and that's okay. It's just that when you're looking more for that type of long-term value that you'll get, and it's a two-way street. It's 100% a two-way street. Is just because you might be a mentee of someone else doesn't mean that you shouldn't be trying as hard as you can to provide them with value, or figure out what is that they really want out of this relationship. And if it's just to coach you and make you a better person, that's great. But then make sure that that is evident, and that you really care, and that you're working on and hearing their advice and actually trying to do something about it. The worst thing you can do is ask for advice and then completely ignore it, and then act like it's worthless or something like that. So yeah, I think that's like a great example. Anthony has been wonderful as well. Anthony actually got paired with me through the GW business plan competition on one of my first startup ideas, and he's just been a great friend. We've met very regularly, and again, I think a lot of stuff has to be organic. Like, I think when you're in a business plan competition type setting, and the relationship is kind of forced, it's like you get paired with someone, and that's a little different. But then I think it's telling that even past the competition, years later, we still meet often, and he's been just a stream of useful information, and I always love picking his brain about whatever I'm working on, and he's always got great advice. So yeah, it's invaluable, these relationships, and whenever something arises, being able to say, these are the first people that I go to. Can you help me with this? They already know you. They're already familiar with you. They're already happy to help. It's just actually doing it. I think it's really, really good.
Yeah, I think one piece of that that's really interesting to me is that especially when you are like with you, when I know that you began to develop a lot of these relationships, it was while you were still in college, and even now for both of us and for a ton of people who are creating awesome things, they're younger and don't necessarily feel that they have value to deliver to mentors. Just like I look at someone like Anthony, I look at Alan, I look at a lot of, even Trevor, a lot of these folks, and I think, like, what is the value I could deliver to them? And so if you're thinking about the student at GW now, or student anywhere who's looking to create something awesome and really build one of these relationships with mentors, how do you think they should go about figuring out what value they could provide to a mentor?
It's an awesome question. The thing that jumps to my mind is the best value that you can provide is to succeed. And I think that, like, you're doing an injustice if you don't. They're offering their time, their resources, connections, whatever you get out of a mentor relationship, and it can be totally different based on who it is and what they want, and etc. But the best thing you can do for them is to succeed. Like, they're helping you, and that's what they want to see at the end of the day, is that you go on and you do great things, and that you are really, really, really trying, and that their advice is being heard, and their connections, if they make them, are being used. And then it's a feedback loop. It's like, if I ask Alan or whoever to introduce me to someone, and then I blow the relationship, and it's like I don't treat it seriously, then why that's not good. Or but then on the other hand, if I get introduced to someone, and then the person comes back and saying, Max was awesome, like, thank you so much for introducing me to Max, like, that was great. That is something, and he's just then he's happy to introduce me to people, because he knows it's going to go well, and he knows that whoever it is going to know that it's going to be handled with care and time and focus, and will hopefully ultimately result in something good. So I think, yeah, that's the biggest thing that you can provide value. And obviously that's a little bit like you have to get past the initial hump of even getting to that point where they're maybe offering advice or making connections or whatever it is that they're doing for you. But yeah, I think you can also sort of show that from the get-go. I think it's always good to have a little bit of credibility from the beginning if you can. Like, don't walk into a meeting if you have an app idea without any wireframes or a prototype. Obviously, you might want some advice on what do you think of this thing, but show a little bit of effort. Like, show that you're invested. You've invested time. You've invested lots of thought into whatever you're doing, because that will make them more interested in investing in you, because you've shown that you really care and you're really trying.
Yeah. One quote that I've heard is that it's better to be prepared and not have an opportunity than to not have an opportunity and to be prepared. Or something. I think I messed that up somehow. I definitely messed that up. But it's better to be prepared when you don't have an opportunity than to be unprepared when you do have one, essentially.
Totally. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think it's you really underscored that point. I'd love to know though, have there, we've spoken a lot about these positive experiences and positive opportunities that you've had through these mentor relationships and through your work, to an extent at least. What have been some of those challenges or even failures in terms of, we could call them lessons learned, in terms of finding mentors and really connecting with them so far?
I think my wisdom on the topic is as far as like the lessons and really trying is kind of like that's the message here. I can't think of a specific time that there's been maybe a failure or lesson learned, or obviously there's been challenges. But again, a lot of this stuff is like, it's kind of like the challenges you have with a friendship. And that's really how I look at a lot of this stuff. It's just like they're friendships, and there are people that one thing that I've done that I think has been a good thing that other people could replicate is, there are people who are your mentors, and they're close and they're regularly in contact. And I think it should always try to be an informal thing, in my opinion. It's not so much like you're my mentor and you're my mentee and, we sail off into the sunset together. It's really, I think, should be organic. But one thing that we've done is when I meet people who I want to stay in contact with and I want to be able to keep them updated on what I'm doing and also hopefully hear from them more regularly, is they're all actually, I kind of put everyone on a group email list. Obviously, it would be ideal if I could send individual emails checking in with every single person that I've ever meet that I want to hear feedback from. But I think it's a cool way to keep people updated. It's one thing that I've found that's been an awesome thing because, I hate meeting cool people and then losing touch with them. And so by having sort of a way to informally, send off updates on what I'm up to, what my team is up to, what we're working on, and then it's very opt-in. So if they want to check in and catch up, and something that I've said interests them, or there's sort of a little bit, kind of keeps the relationship going a little bit. And that's one thing is like especially when you put yourself out there and you are meeting a lot of people, it's very hard to keep in touch with everybody. I'm sure you know this through all the interviews that you're doing, and
Right.
There's a lot of great people that you're talking to that you probably would love to perpetually speak to and get feedback from and make connections or whatever it is, but that's hard to do at scale. And so one way that I've just done that is building sort of big listserv and sending out regular updates, and but that's sort of more periphery type things. It's not necessarily mentor-mentee relationship, but yeah, I think that's kind of, can't really think of a specific failure or anything like that, I would say.
Well, I guess that's a good problem to have.
It's a good thing.
I think it's really exciting for me to hear from you on those topics, just about mentorship and about your experience getting started, because while of course this is really just the beginning of all the awesome things you're going to do, I know I'm very aware of how you've been able to tap into a lot of the knowledge, and some people would say to soak it in like a sponge and apply it to the work that you're doing, which is critically important for anyone, especially though when you are doing something that's a little bit more impact focused, or if you're in a social enterprise environment, I would say. So it's definitely something that people could transfer over to their efforts, regardless of what they are. But just speaking of your efforts with Give Butter, I'd love to know what are you working on now, and what are you hoping to accomplish over the next few years, especially?
Sure. Awesome question. I'm really, really excited for the future because, we're a small team and we have spent a lot of time building our foundation. One thing I didn't mention in the beginning is that we have a brand ambassador program at almost 300 campuses of just students telling other students about Give Butter and why they should use it for their fundraising campaigns. And that's a great sort of foundation to build off of our product. When we started Give Butter, it was literally just a page where people could fundraise. We would build individual campaigns. So someone wanted to start a fundraising campaign, we had a little form they'd fill out, and then we would literally like code every page. And so now it's all self-service. There's a dashboard. There's a great homepage to tell you more about Give Butter. There's so many different pieces of the puzzle that are finally there. And now I feel like the sky is the limit. We want to be your one-stop shop for fundraising. Our users use GiveButter in a bunch of different ways, but there's like kind of three primary use cases. They have an event and they want to sell tickets. So they're kind of fundraising, but typically like a philanthropy event. So like a bunch of people get together, maybe there's a speaker, there's games, but it's everything. The event is raising money for charity, and there's usually some sort of ticketing and registration going on. And right now people use GiveButter, they're just like, donate at least $10 and that will be, your ticket. And it's like, we're trying to build use cases around that to make it more efficient, basic ticketing features. And then people are just straight up fundraising for charity. People want to raise money for a nonprofit, or not just charity, but maybe you're a sports team, maybe you're a student that's going abroad, and you need to raise money, just general purpose fundraising. But the last thing that's really interesting is payment collection. So if you're a nonprofit and you collect dues, or you're a group and you want to collect money for a trip, or just do sort of general payment processing, payment collecting. A lot of people are just using Venmo for that, but you can't track it. You typically raise less money because it's just hard to make sure that everybody's actually paying, and it takes time and it's annoying. And so just by putting kind of all these neat fundraising features all in one place, for any small organization or an individual, or even up to small to mid-sized nonprofits, we can be your platform for fundraising. We can track your donor information. We can make it so that every time you run a fundraising campaign, you can actually reach out to past donors. I mean, these are all things that if you use GoFundMe, if you use a lot of other crowdfunding sites, they're just not intended for organizations. And then there's big tools at the top of the ladder, which are built for top nonprofits that have a lot of this stuff, but they're super expensive. They're very cost prohibitive. And so we're kind of like in that middle of the sandwich where it's like building that really cool, really useful tool that's free, easy to set up, low fees, all that stuff, and actually like fun and engaging and exciting. And so I'm just really excited for the future because we have like our foundation there, and now it's just like we can kind of build all this stuff out and make all of our users more successful on the platform.
That's great to hear. And I guess a follow-up to that, because I've seen a number of the different cases of people using GiveButter. Are there any examples that really stand out to you for someone who's used GiveButter that have been just great use, successful, and a great example of how to use the platform?
Awesome question. So many campaigns come to mind. One that I'm just like so excited about that's running right now is this nonprofit that I spoke about with, I think a couple weeks ago with you. It's Brawl for a Cause, and they basically get just everyday people to fight for their lives. Literally, they put them in a boxing ring, and they're raising money for a charity. So you or I could just start a fundraising campaign, and if we reach a certain amount of dollars raised, then we'll actually be able to participate. They're having the event in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which is where the Atlanta Falcons play, and we are the fundraising platform for all of their brawlers. So they have almost 50 people fundraising right now, and then the top 30 fundraisers will be able to actually participate in the event and sort of brawl for a cause. And I think it's just like really, really cool to have a partnership like that where we have so many different people from all different backgrounds raising money for a cause and actually fighting for it. And so that event's going to be in just a month. But there's so many examples. I mean, our very first campaign was for a nonprofit kosher food truck in DC. And it was cool to actually have that be our first campaign. And then a couple months later, there it was on the street. They raised almost $20,000 to help make that happen. And then all these just student orgs, it's unbelievable. I remember when we got our first campaign, we were like, we don't even know who this is. Like, it's previously we had actually, it was a friend. All of our friends were, could you please start a campaign on GiveButter? Could you please? We were asking. And then the first time, we had a campaign that we were like, we don't actually know this person. They're just, a totally new person out in the universe that just found our site and decided to use us for their fundraising. And there's just so many of those now where it's like, people that we've never interacted with prior to them coming to GiveButter, and whether they're raising money for a nonprofit, they're starting a startup, they're starting a new book. Just tons of students all over the country that are brand ambassadors of GiveButter. And I don't know, it's like a lot of cool that I can just go through tons of different campaigns that's like, wow. It's really neat to be able to have, even though we're not the ones actually doing the fundraising necessarily, it's cool to be the sort of hand in the middle that's helping make that happen and hopefully helping them do it even better.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd like to think that I'm like ahead and really cool because I know about GiveButter. But the funny thing to me about it is that I've told a number of people about GiveButter as a solution, and you know, as it grows, I could say for myself, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I've heard of Give Butter. Like I've checked it out and all that. And so it's cool to hear also about the updates and how you're making it better, but also just how things are, how the message is spreading, which I think is really positive to see. I guess as a follow up to that, and really, we could probably sit here for hours talking about Give Butter and your work and our thoughts on business and social enterprise and so on and so forth. But just thinking about how the word gets spread, I'd love to know from you, as I mentioned before in one of my favorite questions, that when your work is all said and done, when you've had the impact that you're aiming to have, what would that title of your book or documentary be, and why?
Yeah, so I think my answer is stands, which is I think it would just be my name. I think it's funny because when I first heard that as a question, and also in your past interviews and stuff, some of my favorite, like I'm reading right now, I'm reading Steve Jobs. It's like that's the title, and I think for me though, what it means is that one thing that I came back to also thinking of what if I had a title of a book, what would it be? And it's just that I'm just being me. Like I'm not being anybody else. I'm not trying to fake something that I'm not. And I don't really feel like I have a theme of my life, like you were saying earlier, where sometimes things happen and you have this, overwhelming. It's just my story is just doing things that I enjoy doing, surrounding myself with people that I like being around, and trying to make that all work so that I don't, I can live. You know what I mean? Like survive. And I think that that's probably how I'll be for the rest of my life. It's just like it's not so much I want to save the world, or I want to do something grandiose. There's also not necessarily that. I'd be complacent just doing the daily, the typical routine. I've just kind of like tried to follow the beat of my own drum, just follow my heart. And so yeah, it's just kind of like if you had to have a title, it'd be like being me. But probably it would just be my name. But yeah, I think that's kind of what a lot of this stuff comes down to. And also, I think that there's a lot of story hopefully yet to be written. And I think that could always definitely change. But I would hope that would, if I could say right now that, my title in a while would just continue to be being me. I hope that I don't, change that kind of philosophy, because it makes me happy. It's as long as, every decision I make and every sort of, when I think about how I want to, where Give Butter is going to go and where I'm going to go, etc., it's kind of like, when the best place to look is to look inward. And it's always like, ask other people that kind of help you make your decisions and stuff. But I don't know. I feel like I just kind of try to follow my gut and intuition, and it usually gets me to a good place. So yeah, being me, I guess.
Speaking of being you, though, what are what's one misconception that people have about who you are, and like one thing that people don't know that you think that the 180 Degrees of Impact audience should know about you and your work?
Huh. That's such an interesting question, because it's like you got to put your mind in someone else who might have a misconception about me. I had a big, like when I was going through school, I was in a fraternity. Going through high school, I had a lot of, I just was like a social person. I always kind of really put myself out there and tried to have a lot of friends and just, be that every guy or everyone likes, just being likable. And something kind of happened, especially once I started getting more into startups, where I just stopped caring so much about that. And what changed was that it was much more important to me to keep the people I really cared about close, and everything else it was just periphery. And so I think there's maybe some people where this is also much more personal maybe than just like what the audience might think of me. Right. Not that I'm, but I do think that it's just like a life philosophy that I think a lot of people should take on. But it's just to kind of acknowledge that, at the end of the day, who are the people that you really, really love, really care about, that you really want to surround yourself with, really want to build those deep relationships with, because I think it's limited. You can't do that with everybody. And a lot of people, they just have so many friends. It's like everyone, they're very social, very out there. And I think that's great. But I also think it's easy to forget like what really matters and who really matters. And that's kind of how I look at it at the end of the day. I don't think I'm necessarily like so public or so anything where it would be like people have a misconception about me. I'm pretty, I don't know. This is me. So I don't really know as far as that stuff goes, but personally, I think it's just, that's just kind of how I look at a lot of things. It's just, who I really love, who I really care about. And that's the most important thing to me.
Yeah. And I mean, that's something that we all learn over time, especially just getting older and understanding, like you're saying, what really matters, and understanding like, hey, I don't need to spend my time with everyone and with all of these people. Like I could choose to spend my time with people who really who I enjoy being with, who could contribute to who I am, who I could contribute to, and people who just make your life better. And so it's cool to hear that. And it would be really interesting in like 10 years to interview you again and to have a conversation to understand how that all plays out. Like from the perspective of what you were just saying about who you are and being you, but also when it comes to Give Butter, because I see great things in the future. Oddly enough, I'm wearing the gosh, I need to stop wearing like yellow and orange, because I'm wearing like the Give Butter, literally the Give Butter color. But yeah, that's a whole other story. For people who want to learn more about your story, for a seamless segue, where could they learn more about Give Butter? What are your links, your social media information, and how could they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so definitely check out givebutter.com. We're really accessible. We have a little cool chat thing in the corner. So shoot us a message, shoot me a message. So we're really responsive on there. But my big thing is I'm trying to grow my LinkedIn. So definitely add me on LinkedIn. Send me a message if there's anything I said in here that you have questions about or want to talk more about. That's a good place to reach me, and like and comment on all my posts. That would be awesome. But yeah, trying to go to LinkedIn, trying to write more, and that's where I'm gonna be sharing everything. So LinkedIn, and then check out the site.
Awesome. And for anyone who wants to learn more about 180 Degrees of Impact, the website's www.lets.care, at Lets You Care on all the social media. I too am on LinkedIn. So add me and get in touch by email, hello@lets.care. And again, Max, thank you for being part of this and for joining me. And I really appreciated our conversation.
Likewise. Thank you, Matt. This was fun.
Cool. And for anyone who's watching, until next time, keep impacting.